It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, and I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know that we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, it's love so undeniable. I can hardly speak. It's so unexplainable. I can hardly think as you go. Deeper still as you call. Deeper still as you call. Deeper still into love. Love, love, you're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am.
Oh, how
So I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands, in the heartache, all the same.
So last week, my wife and I took our daughter on a bike ride. And so she's still kind of learning how to do it and all that stuff. And so she goes on her bike and we just kind of walk behind her. But she's still got the training wheels on and everything, but she's getting pretty fast. And so she usually will be about 2 to 3 houses ahead of us in our neighborhood. And so we get to the end of our bike ride and she is actually in front of our house, kind of stopped there. And my wife and I are about 2 to 3 houses kind of behind her. And across the street, there's this guy running who doesn't have a shirt on. And so my daughter sees this and she just starts yelling back at us, "Mom, Dad, he's naked." And she just starts yelling this for the whole neighborhood to hear. And so my wife and I are starting to walk a little bit faster to, kind of muzzle her a little bit and have her just, stop talking, basically, stop embarrassing. And we're laughing, we're slightly embarrassed at this moment. And so we're kind of power walking a little faster and she won't stop. "Mom, he's naked. Mom, he doesn't have clothes on." And it goes from that to now she is not yelling at us. She's actually yelling at the guy across. Hey, you're naked. You can't do that. Go put clothes on. I'm not joking. She says all of this. And we're just like mortified, but laughing. And so finally we get up there and we kind of are like, it's fine. Just like muzzling her really quickly. Luckily the guy across the street, it was really funny. He was laughing. He wasn't mad about it or anything like that. It was just really, really funny. And so you think about it, but like, my daughter didn't know to like not yell at strangers, right? Like she had a different perspective than I did about the situation. Now, like when I see people running with their shirt off, like yes, I judge them, because it's weird, but apparently that's what people in Fresno and Clovis do. I don't fully understand it, but like I don't say anything. But when she sees someone running without a shirt on, she thinks they're naked. Like no matter if they're wearing, shorts and shoes or anything like that, they are fully naked. That's what she sees in her mind. Same situation, seeing the exact same thing, but completely different perspectives. You see, our perspectives or how we view the situation were different in this moment. Our perspectives didn't really align. A couple weeks ago, we actually started talking about a series about prayer. And then the whole world went crazy and we kind of put a pause on that. But I want to kind of continue to talk about prayer today. The first week, we talked all about how our prayers should be genuine and authentic. We shouldn't do prayer just for the show. We shouldn't be praying just so others view us as holy or for whatever reasons. But maybe we go into our prayers with God with great intentions. We enter into that time of talking to Him, and it isn't for the show. It isn't to be seen by others. But if you're like me, I know oftentimes my prayer life can feel like a wish list. It can feel like a Christmas list. God, here are all the things I'm worried about. God, here are all the things I need your help with. God, this person is sick, heal them. God, this relationship is broken, fix that. And we pray our prayer, we say the things we need to say, and then the conversation is over. I often feel like I go into my prayer time like a child trying to convince their parents to let them hang out with their friends, right? You know those moments where you rehearse what you were going to say, you rehearse how you were going to say it because you want just your mom and dad to let you go to the movies with your friends or a sleepover at your friend's house. That's all you want them to do. But that's not really how our prayer life should look. Does God want to know what we are struggling with? Of course He does. Does God want to know what we are worried about in life? Yes, of course. Philippians 4:6 tells us that we need to present our requests to God. But should that be the sole purpose of our prayer time? Just giving our requests to God? In the book of Psalms 139, David writes, he says, "Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely." So God knows what we are going to say before we say it. God actually even knows what we are going to say before we even think it. So why would the sole purpose of prayer be to give God requests when He already knows our requests? Let me ask you this question. Do you know of someone who is incapable of having an actual conversation? Like not someone that's like quiet or like socially awkward or anything like that. But like when I say a conversation, I mean someone where they actually listen. They actually hear you out. They respond to your feelings and opinions. Instead, we might know people who always just talk and talk and talk, and they never actually listen to what you're saying, right? They have a topic they want to talk about in mind, and that's what they're going to talk about. They don't respond or listen to the other person. They simply use the other person to talk at them, not to talk with them. Sometimes I feel like my prayer life looks like that, whether I realize it or not. You see, maybe our prayer life has very little to do with our own thoughts, our own requests, and our own desires. Because my prayer life becomes this one-sided monologue. And I go to God and I say what I'm going to say, and I discuss the things that I want to discuss during that prayer time. And then that's it. But maybe our prayer life should look a little different. Maybe that alone time should look a little different with him. You see, our prayer life shouldn't be us convincing God to bend his will to ours. Prayer should be about us changing our will to God's will. Prayer should not be about changing God's perspective. It should be about changing our own perspective. We are not in a courtroom trying to argue our case, hoping that the judge changes his mind. That's not what prayer is at all. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus tells this huge crowd that's gathered around us, and he says this. He says, "Everyone who hears my words and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock." You see, we have to hear the words that Jesus is trying to tell us. Not only the words written down in the Bible, but the words that Jesus is trying to communicate to us during our prayer time. And our prayer time has to be this intentional time that we are listening to God, listening to what he wants, listening to what he desires for our life. Now, this probably won't be some booming voice from the heavens telling you exactly what to do. You probably won't go on a prayer walk and find a burning bush that lays out your entire plans of your life. But we have to understand that prayer isn't just for us to give our requests to God. He already knows all of those requests. He already knows what you're going to ask. He already knows your true desires and wants and needs. And sometimes he just wants to sit with us and spend time with us. But during that time, we have to try to begin to understand God's perspective. We have to try to see God's will and desire in every situation. But I know I'm scared of God's will and desire sometimes. I'm scared of what his plan is going to be because I know that God's plan might be pushing me out of my comfort zone. It might be the opposite of what I actually want to do. Because maybe that prayer time ends with us knowing that we need to end a relationship. Maybe it ends with us knowing that we need to change a friendship, that we need to stop an addiction or start a habit. But we are afraid to live out what God's will is because we don't know what's going to happen. Paul talks about in the book of Romans that God has a good, pleasing, and perfect plan for our lives, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. I love the way it talks about God and his plan and his ways in the book of Isaiah. It says this in Isaiah 55. This is God talking. He says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." He's basically saying the distance between heaven and earth, that is the distance between your thoughts and my thoughts, your will and my will. That's how big the difference is. And what he's saying in this moment is we can trust his plan, because they are better than you and I can ever even imagine. You see, our prayer life should be laser focused on figuring out what God's will is and what he desires from our life. Our prayer life should not be about figuring out how God can serve us, but how we can serve God. And we say, "God, this is what I want, but I'm also here to hear what you want. What do you want from my life? How do you want me to approach this situation? How do you want me to deal with this? Because God, I'm willing to listen. I understand that your ways are so much higher than my ways." Let's pray. God, we so often come to you with just our requests. And we lay out all the things that we want, all the desires of our heart, all the needs that we want. And God, it's not that we need to stop doing that, because you care about those things. You care about the things that we are struggling with. You care about the things that we are going through. But God, we also need to have that time where we try to understand what your perspective is, what your will is, what your plan is. And God, take that desire out of our heart to begin to try to bend your wills to ours so that we can just sit and say, "God, what is your will? God, how can I listen to you better? God, how can I serve you better?" Not the other way around. So, God, this week, as we enter into our time of prayer, as we enter into our time of spending time with you, may we closer align our perspective and our hearts with what you want. Because, God, I know for me, sometimes they can be so far out of whack, that they can be so distant from what you want. And, God, that is not my desire. I give my perspective, I give my needs and my wants and my desires over to you. And I say, God, change me into who you want me to be. We love you. Amen.